1886, DeLand, Florida was just mosquito-infested swampland. The thought that somebody would build a house here was just outrageous. The thought that they would build this house is unbelievable. Snowbirds, they call them, wealthy northerners who come down in winter in Florida. This man was probably the first. This was the first luxury mansion built in Florida. John B. Stetson built this house. And if you've ever owned a cowboy hat, there's a real good chance his name was inside it. This is my America. Let me show you around. Michael, what a spectacular example of a Gilded Age home. It's right here in DeLand, Florida. Open to the public. People can tour any time of year, but it's also actually your home. You and your partner JT are the ones who are responsible for bringing this back from really the brink of disaster.
Well, you know, Chip, this is actually the only Gilded Age mansion in Florida. So this being in 1886 is the first and only Gilded Age mansion ever built in Florida.
The whole point of Gilded Age architecture was to kind of go over the top, to show that you were aware of other cultures of the world and that you could afford to replicate those cultures. And a lot of times they did it all in one place.
Gilded Age implies luxury.
Sure.
There are other mansions built in that time period, but they didn't have the floors, the windows, and all the extra bells and whistles this house had.
What was it like when you found it?
When we found it was pretty rough. There wasn't even a driveway. It was in nice condition, but it hadn't been touched or altered or improved in 100 years.
It's a lot of house to maintain.
This is the more traditional Victorian side of the house.
Wow.
But you can really see the Moorish influence with the three arches.
Oh,
and
sure.
if you look at all the windows, they had the keyhole design. It's supposed to be. Right after they built the house, they realized that room was too small, and this was an outdoor porch. They closed in the porch and closed in the arches. Normally these arches would be open. They did that, and they extended the dining room because at the time there's a competition with the DeBarrys to have the biggest dining room. So DeBarry did his, so Stetson had to do his.
A lot of that is always driven by keeping up with the Joneses. It's just extraordinary to me to look at all of these different styles in one house, and somehow it works, and it's just phenomenal.
Beyond the pool on the other side of the street, he had a full gator pit. He'd invite his friends to come see his alligators, Ponce and De Leon, and he'd bring them over there, and that was part of the entertainment. He had monkeys on the property. He had peacocks on the property. You know, people had never been to Florida before, so he had to show them all this stuff, and give them reasons to come, see the wildlife, enjoy the warm weather, eat some oranges. He jump-started tourism in this part of Florida.
Is that right? So, I mean, we think about that before he came here, really, this was just swampland, and you would think maybe some sharp-talking cracker sold it to him, and he came and tried to build on a swamp, but actually he had vision, and he saw what this could become.
He had a friend that was selling orange groves, and so his friend Henry DeLand sold him 300 acres, and that's what brought him here. Plus, he had tuberculosis, and he needed to get into a warm climate, you know, for his own health.
And that's something he had battled his whole life. That's what sent him out west in the first place.
Right.
And that's where he saw
dry climate.
He saw the cowboys then in all kind of headgear. It might be a bandana, it might be a fedora, it might be whatever they picked up off the ground. It wasn't a baseball cap, we know that. But he looked around and said, these folks need a hat made just for them. And that's where he first came up with the concept for the Stetson hats.
I think he made one for himself, you know, and since he was a hatter trained, he made a good quality one, and someone came along and bought it off his head and gave him $5 and said, I want it. And it's like, wow, I might be able to make some money at this. And that's when he went back east and opened up his own shop.
Since then, they've sold a few Stetson hats.
They have.
So this was built as a winter home, but Stetson himself spent a lot of time here.
Stetson spent 6 months a year here, starting in 1886, till he died in the house in 1906.
In the home.
He's Florida's first snowbird.
And then there's Christmas.
And
Michael,
then there's Christmas.
Christmas at the Stetson Mansion. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before. It's spectacular. And I've seen a lot of the nation's great homes decorated for Christmas. But this might be the best Christmas house in America.
What we do here is a different concept. We have Instead of sort of decorating a room, there's 10 rooms with 10 different themes, and each is telling a message of Jesus and the birth of Christ and the meaning of Christmas, and each year that story changes. It's geared a little bit more for adults than children. There's not, a lot of we don't have animatronics and
It's not Disney World.
It's not,
That's right down the road.
Yeah, it's not Disney. And you have to really look at the many complicated, each scene has many complicated layers. It's not just, garland on a mantle. It's a whole construction. It's like store windows in New York City.
It's really spectacular. I can't imagine how it takes over your home.
Well, you know what? It's the best thing about sharing the home, that people get to see it. If that's what'll bring them here, why not? So Chip, what's amazing about this kitchen is the fact that it's attached to the house. Now, back in those days, they would have a detached kitchen, but I think Stetson felt he had enough money that if the house burned down, he could build a new one.
I've never seen an older home with an attached kitchen. I've seen many where they were added after the fact.
Yeah, exactly.
But not that was built as
But
part
he
of the
also
original
had
house.
water pressure here. So he could have had a hose to put out the fire if he had that. 'Cause
How
built
did
himself
he get water
He could have
pressure
built
into-
himself a 3-story water tower.
A water tower.
About a mile away, and he could bring water all the way up to the 3rd floor and his kitchen.
He really brought everything to this part of the world.
This is the most modern house that Florida had ever seen. Steam heat, electricity, water pressure, and a call bell system.
Wow.
No house had it.
And just some of the most spectacular glass work you'll ever see anywhere.
Chip, this is more of the Gothic side of the house. This is where you reveal some of the 10,000 panes of glass,
Right.
leaded glass and windows we have,
Look at
all
this.
intact. And you'll have the tower that you'd see in a more typical Gothic house where the stairwell will be. And then you have this little jut out here, which was originally a crying porch. It was
what?
half the size, a crying porch.
Crying porch.
Yeah, where they rock the babies.
Oh, if the baby's crying, you bring them outside.
But then when the babies got a little older, they doubled the size of it and made it another full bathroom.
Michael, there's a sign here that says schoolhouse.
Chip, let me tell you about this building. This originally was the first kitchen on the property. There used to be a huge chimney up the center of it. They would cook all the meals for the people building the house and the Stetsons when they first got here. After the Stetsons were here, they added that kitchen and converted this to be a schoolhouse to homeschool their 3 boys. They would bring a school teacher with them from Philadelphia, and she would live in the back building. And if you go inside the building, on either side, there's remnants of the original 2 blackboards. And then what made this more unusual is that Stetson used to let children of the field hands go to class if they wanted to.
So that was part of, he really, from everything that I know and understand, he was really a very egalitarian, progressive, forward-looking guy.
This guy, like the latest in progress for everybody, not just him. He loved technology, his friends was Thomas Edison, and he also believed in being benevolent and generous to anybody he met. So he helped people out, whether it was farmhands or his workers.
His philanthropic impact is still felt today, and not just in this community, far beyond this community, right down to the establishment of Florida's first law college, which even today Stetson cranks out some of the most renowned attorneys in the world.
His contributions to the DeLand Academy turned it into Stetson University here in DeLand, and it became Florida's first private university.
Now, the impact of John B. Stetson's philanthropy is still felt not just in DeLand, but far beyond DeLand. He brought progress to Florida. He really started the modern Florida era, right down to establishing the state's first private university.
When Henry DeLand went bankrupt and went back to upstate New York,
Now, DeLand is the man who the town is named after.
named after, it was originally called Persimmon Hollow. Henry DeLand came, started buying up property. He sold his company up in New York. He made baking soda. He sold that, came down here, started buying orange groves, started reselling them to people. He was a land speculator. And then he told his friend Stetson to come down here for his health. Stetson owned a lot of the property here. There was 300 acres. He owned property downtown. Most of Stetson University was owned by Stetson.
Oh my goodness.
So when Henry left, Stetson came in and donated a little bit of money to school, then a little bit more and a little bit more, and then he gave them the land, built buildings, and the rest is history. Florida's first private university.
Amazing. What a story, and I mean, you would never know unless you got off the interstate. If you made a point of coming through here, taking that road not taken sometime is the best choice we
this
can make.
is
Isn't it?
literally, like the song off to grandmother's house. You literally have to go through the forest or over the river to
and through
get
the
here.
woods.
When Stetson oversaw the electric here in one of the first homes in the world designed and built with electricity.
So it was planned.
It was
to have
planned.
electricity.
Yeah, we didn't never have gas here. People say, oh, the gas lamps were converted. No. Thomas Edison designed this for his friend Stetson.
Thomas Edison?
Absolutely. They were friends.
Edison.
Yeah, because they were contemporaries. They both came from Orange, New Jersey. They both grew up and they both knew each other. And Stetson loved technology. He loved the latest, greatest thing. This powered the house when we bought it. In 2005, it was still powering the house.
This was the working fuse
And
box.
instead of having fuses, they would have like hat pins.
Oh no!
So if you blew a fuse, you just got a hat pin
Pull it out and pop
put
it in.
And it still operates a small portion of the house today. We moved it from the second floor so you could turn on and off certain zones.
And that's
each one. And these are the original tags that Stetson himself signed when he designed the house.
Now the Edison connection. Edison has a home in Fort Myers. Were they pals? Were they buddies? Was Edison here?
Try to trace the history. They both came down the same year. But while they were coming down, it's like, listen, let me help you out. And that's why Edison gave Stetson one out of 5 generators in the world to run this house until he built his own power plant. DeLand is the first city in Florida to have electric streetlights because of Stetson being friends with Edison.
So it was just a couple of buddies. And Tom said, let me hook you up.
Exactly. And that power plant's just about a mile away and still runs the town?
Oh my God.
It's a different name now.
They did not mess around back then, did they? Thomas Alva Edison, right there in Living Black and White. That's incredible. Just to know that you're standing here with something that Edison and Stetson, both men in the same home. Edison was hardly the only famous guest to ever stay here. There were kings and queens and heads of state. What's the list of luminaries?
I mean, King Edward VII, you have the Astor's band. I have to say, this is the only show in town. When this was built, there was no place else to go in this area. So if you're going to travel to South Florida or any place in Florida, you're going to stop at the Stetson household. It's the only place here. So this was the place. Can you imagine you coming here 125 years ago when there was nothing here but just nature?
If I could have,
them it was a paradise.
If I could have stayed here, it would have been all right. I've heard of the home. This is the first time I've ever gotten to come here. I heard it was grand. I heard it was opulent. But this is spectacular.
Yeah, when most people think of a Victorian home, they think of a certain level of embellishment. But this was built by the richest guy living in Florida at the time. It was over the top. And yes, he didn't do what other people did in the Gilded Age, put all their embellishment in the ceiling. He put it all in the floors. 16 patterns of inlaid parquet wood floors. And very few houses in America have.
They're spectacular. He did not get these at Linoleum Warehouse.
No,
or something.
He didn't.
These were all made piece by piece.
I mean, you have basket weave, you have windows that quilters use, you have X patterns, you have them in every room on the first 2 floors.
Now this home is a blend of several architectural styles, which was common of Gilded Age architecture. They were kind of trying to show off everywhere they'd been, everything they'd learned, everything they had seen. It all came together in that Gilded Age style.
And some of the things were imported, like we were on a trip overseas and we went to Jordan, and these screens here on the left and right, they explained to us they're not made in Jordan, they're made in Syria. The wall into the music room library, it's made in France. It was imported from a 17th century chateau. So there's all kinds of things here because, wealthy Americans would go overseas and they would buy the best and the most beautiful products they could and import them here, put them on a ship and bring them back. It'd take a little while, but they'd get here.
So obviously for John Stetson, price was no object. I mean, he could get whatever he wanted, anywhere he wanted.
Yeah, he could. Although he was a wealthy man, he was also a very generous man to his community and to his friends and to anybody in need.
The Christmas theme, it's not just a theme, it's every room, and it's all decorated in the most extraordinary styles. Every room has a theme.
Every room has its own little story, though. Every room has a theme and the meaning behind it and the meaning of Christmas. And everything relates to what the reason for the season is.
And do these rooms change year by year? Is it the same show every year?
Absolutely not.
No.
Every year, every single item that you see
starts
from scratch. Every ornament, every garland, every Christmas light comes off, gets wrapped and packed individually, puts in a box, and come out one by one. Everything is individually put. And it's all different every year.
How long does it take to put this house together for Christmas?
It takes between 8 and 12 weeks
Wow.
to set it up, working 16 to 18 hours a day.
And how many crew do you have doing that?
There's one person that sets up and places every single object and creates each story and each theme.
Person.
One person does it.
Who's that?
That's JT. He's one of the owners of the mansion. There are two.
So he's clearly got a little artist in him.
You know what? He doesn't come from an artist background. He's self-trained. This has evolved over probably the last 10 years. Each year has gotten a little bit more involved, a little more involved. So I think this year you'll see the most layers ever.
People rave about the Stetson Mansion at Christmas.
Each year there's 10 rooms, and in this room is the dining room. This year the dining room table is taken out, so there'll be more room for people to really walk around and look at each scene. This room is the full celebration of the Christ child's birth. The tree itself is carved out in the center to represent one of the 30 nativities we have here. Overlooking the tree are the three magi that were handmade piece by piece by a fan of the mansion who donated them to us. As the magi crossed the desert, they might have come to a marketplace, and the colored lanterns that are lit up represents that marketplace. And on this side of the room is a scene to represent the gifts that people and the magi might have presented to the Christ child. There is the jewelry, there's the myrrh, incense. The whole story of this room is celebrating, the birth of Christ. And that's what this tour here at Stetson Mansion is. It's a celebration. It's kind of a religious celebration of Christmas.
Now, another striking thing about this room are these tributes and memorials that we see set up to servicemen and first responders. Who are these people, Mike?
Every year of our 10 rooms, there are 3 rooms that we repeat, but in a totally different way. We honor the Stetson family and the Stetson Hat Company, peacocks that roam the property, and also a tribute to our military. And our tribute is dedicated to servicemen and loved ones and first responders that have served us and left us. Little reminders of people that have helped us have the lifestyle we have today.
Michael, this room has a different feel to it than the rest of the house.
Yeah, Chip, every year, as I mentioned downstairs, there's one room dedicated to John B. Stetson and his legacy, and this year it's in the Gillen Suite. This room is named after Dr. Gillen, who Stetson bought the house from. There are Stetson memorabilia, from his hats to his belt buckles to even a Blanco glass hat, which is the most historic glass company in West Virginia, and they honor Stetson with a clear glass hat on the back. But it's all to bring back the memory of Stetson and the feeling of Stetson and the reason we're in this house.
Some of the things that we're looking at, I mean, there's a page out of the old Stetson catalog with all the, every hat he made here.
Yeah, Stetson made a lot more than cowboy hats, although he's most famous for his iconic cowboy hat, but he made a huge amount of different designs. He was always on the latest, greatest cutting edge, and worldwide. He had factories in England and Japan. He sold around the world. He was the most famous guy at his time.
And am I looking at an old stock certificate from the Stetson Company?
Somebody donated us one of the stock certificates from Stetson Company as one of the memorabilia. We've been so blessed with people giving us Stetson memorabilia. They'll donate hats, hat boxes, items, even forms. This is one of the great things about this place. Things just have come to us that we can share with the public that we never expected would happen.
I would guess that people understand that if they have some kind of memorabilia that's relevant, this is where it will be preserved and protected and seen and enjoyed.
Exactly. We share the Stetson memorabilia, and we also share their Christmas memorabilia. A lot of people have kids or children that don't want the things they've collected and cherished a lifetime. They give it to us, and we share it with the public. And JT figured out some way to work it into next year's display, or maybe the year after, but it all comes out, and it helps embellish the house to the level that it is now.
Michael, it must be an extraordinary feeling to come home at night and walk through this door and say, this is my home.
One of the questions people ask me is like, how do you feel having people in your house? And I speak for JT and I, we find the most joy when we can hear voices and laughter in the house. This is really a house that needs to be shared and enjoyed by everyone. We feel more caretakers in our home, but we're lucky we get to be here. But it's really the best when it's filled with tons of people sharing and enjoying and appreciating what we appreciate: the floors, the windows, the walls, the whole place.
It's remarkable what you've done. Discovered a lost treasure, really an unknown treasure to our time, brought it back to its original grandeur, modernized it and brought it along with the times at the same time, and present it as a showcase for America.